and the imprisonment of Pastor Sun, who's been jailed, had his church raided, and his property seized. And I want to take this opportunity to just mention Chance, his son, his brave son, who was at the event last night. I believe he's here today. And so given Chance and what he is trying to do on behalf of his father, I hope you could speak a little bit, Ambassador Chan, about how religious freedom advocates and policymakers should respond when a mature democracy begins weaponizing law enforcement against religious minorities, and in particular here in South Korea against Christians.
Yes, thank you. You know, to understand what's happening in South Korea recently, one has to understand a little bit more of the bigger picture. And so, as Sarah mentioned, North Korea, every study, every year, including every State Department study, is the worst persecutor of Christians, bar none, according to every study, every year. And to understand, North Korea has been seeking to overtake South Korea by force as their overriding objective during the entirety of their existence. The Korean War that occurred from 1950 to 1953 has not ended. It is a ceasefire armistice agreement. It is not a peace treaty. And the Korean Peninsula is connected and shares the largest part of the northern border with China. And so the Chinese Communist Party, just think of what a prize South Korea is to the Chinese Communist Party and to North Korea. It is estimated that there are over 1 million agents, spies, operatives from the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, and North Korea in South Korea. And there has been a long march through the institutions of South Korea that is reaching what looks like potentially the culminating phase of that. And so now you have a small band of leftist radicals in South Korea who are communizing the country in increasingly authoritarian and veering towards totalitarian rule, believe it or not. And this is in a country that, together with the United States, and only behind the United States, is the second leading country in terms of number of Christian missionaries that are sent out. 6 out of the 10 largest Christian churches are in South Korea. But now, in an unprecedented way, these churches are being raided, and thank God that President Trump has called that out publicly multiple times. The largest church in the world, the Yoido Full Gospel Church, was raided. Billy Kim, who was Billy Graham's translator in Korea, his church, the largest Baptist church in the world, has been raided, as well as the Far East Broadcasting Corporation that Pastor Kim also leads. And also, you have, I want to particularly highlight, we have here Chance Sun. It's a little bit confusing because the last name is transliterated S-O-N. And so you have the son of Pastor Sun, who is here, who leads a large church in South Korea. But I want to tell you a bit about him and what he's experienced in South Korea. He led the movement countering the comprehensive anti-discrimination law, which was an LGBTQ plus sort of law that he gathered millions in South Korea to oppose and successfully oppose that law. When COVID struck and there was a ban on Christian worship services by the leftist administration of Moon Jae-in, he refused to follow that and continued the services in the church building until they literally locked the building and would not let him do it. So then he led the services out in the yard outside of the church and continued to do so. And when there was, as President Trump has rightfully called out, a revolution and purge going on in South Korea, where you had a coup d'etat under a thinly veiled color of law against President Yoon, and he was leading, Pastor Sun was leading the Save Korea movement in South Korea. He also just interviewed a candidate for a local school board race that was going on in his area. And can you believe it? Pastor Sun has been thrown in jail for these things. And he is tremendously brave. I know him personally. I've spoken multiple times at his church. I say this descriptively, I think without any exaggeration. He is a Christ-like pastor. He is one who was not afraid to be jailed. In fact, he said, if this helps the world to know that South Korea is not free, I will go to jail. And he preached an amazing sermon just before he was put into jail about David versus Goliath. Because here is a David who is standing up to the rising Goliath in South Korea, of this authoritarian, leftist, communistic sort of regime that has come to power, that dominates every branch of government, the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, and is collapsing them into uniparty rule, that is dominating things like the unions and the educational system. There are actually remarkable parallels with some of the things we've experienced here in the United States. But who would have thought that South Korea would be communized to potentially try to reunify the peninsula under communist rule via South Korea and not North Korea? Who would have imagined that this would happen? And it's happening in an unprecedented and accelerated clip that has never been seen before in South Korea. There have never been raids on Christian churches in South Korea, never in the history of South Korea. We've never seen what's happened to Pastor Sun. This is unprecedented, what is happening in South Korea. And arguably, South Korea, the people, they love America. Like 90% of South Korean people consider the U.S. its best ally. And in a lot of ways, South Korea is like the image of the United States, in that the systems, the political systems, the economic systems, the culture, so much of it is closely tied and very much akin to the United States, which really saved South Korea in the Korean War and planted our systems. And it was U.S. evangelical missionaries who pioneered South Korea in terms of Christianity, which was unreached with the gospel in the 1800s. And in Pyongyang, North Korea, which was the center of Christianity in all of Asia, it was called the Jerusalem of the East, is now the center of the most despotic regime on planet Earth, the worst persecutor of Christians, bar none in the world. And so many people in the U.S. still are stunned that something like this could be happening in South Korea. I wish none of it were true. I wish the things I've been speaking out were all false. If somebody were to tell me, no, it's just a bad dream, you wake up, it's not true, I would be delighted if that were the case. But as I'm watching this closely and as I'm speaking this out, persecution in South Korea of Christian churches and pastors is happening to an unprecedented extent, believe it or not, in South Korea.
Thank you, Ambassador Chan. I'm going to apologize. I'm doing a poor job of being a moderator and keeping us on time, but this is so important for us to hear. And again, I want us to be an encouragement to Chance, who's here. Please pray for him. Pray for his father. If you see him today, say hello, give him a hug, and encourage him.